Welcome back to Students for Political Engagement. Today we have a Ward 2 Councillor candidate, Sigmund Lee. Welcome. To start us off, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Okay, thank you everyone for inviting me. My name is Sigmund Lee. I'm a chartered professional accountant and I have over 30 years of experience in industry, finance, and management. I have been involved with volunteering, including as chair for a non-profit organization. I'm an active member of the community, and I'm also a Ward 2 resident. In fact, we are still the original owner of the house we live in. Some of my priorities: safety in the community, restoring civility in the council, transparency in our budgets and reporting, responsible development driven by a proper planning process. And one other thing that I think is really important is removing the red tape so that we can encourage business to come and invest and start their business in Richmond Hill, so that we don't have those a lot of issues and whatnot that they have to deal with to start the business here. Now, why I think I'm the best candidate? Because I bring to the table the financial expertise that the current council sorely needs.
Thank you for your introduction. So the first question has something to do with, I'm sure, something that's very near and dear to your heart, finance. So as a municipality, financial health of the city is very important to how it functions. So what would you do as councillor to ensure that Richmond Hill is on good financial grounds, while at the same time providing the same or improved services?
I think one of the very most important thing that we have to do is we have to review how we spend our money. We have these problems of allocating a budget to each department every year with an increase without actually reviewing what they do and how they spend the money. If those money could be spent somewhere else, or if those money could be taken back and shift it over to different projects. One of the biggest issues with all governments is they don't start with zero budgeting. They just every year after year they come to the table and say, last year we spent 10,000, this year we want 11,000. That's something that I think we should shift and do proper budgeting. As far as I'm concerned, we should not penalize departments that did not use their money last year. And in fact, if they return the money back, they can always ask for it again. The current situation is if you don't spend your money, you don't get it the next year. This is something that, it's a change. We have to change the perception of how money are being spent and handled at the department level.
So wouldn't you say that it's possible, for example, that by abolishing the system where if a department does not spend all its money, doesn't get that money back, that this might make departments get overfunded and get amounts of money that they might not necessarily need?
Absolutely. That's why the current situation is if a department gets their money this year, they don't spend it, and you see at every government department by February, March, they're all rushing to spend every cent they have so that they can go back to the finance committee and say, well, hey, we need X dollars more next year. We should have that mentality that if you don't spend it, it's okay to return it. And then next year, if you want it, let's talk about it again. That way, you don't penalize them. You actually help encourage an environment where they know that they're not going to be penalized. They won't foolishly spend them.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the answer. And I think our next question is on community safety, which I think you've talked about a bit. So community safety is obviously a very important part of what makes community livable. So what would you do as a counselor to maintain and improve community safety in Richmond Hill?
I have been in contact with the area residents in Crosby, where it is one of the worst area of the ward in terms of safety. We have used needles at a lot of places. We have petty theft. We have all kinds of things happening in there. I've been working with them for last little while to try to find solutions to help to hopefully resolve these issues. We have issues in that area for the last 6 years. We have our current councillor and regional councillor who were great at photo ops, and after that they all disappeared for the last little while. Now that area has now shifted up, and we have seen activities in the Bernard area where there are also petty theft. So my goal is to start the conversation. If you look at my blog, or if you look at the York Region News on my profile, I say the first 100 days, I will deal with these issues. That is my priority. So, you know, it's not something that I just talk about. It's something that I'm committed to doing.
So do you have any preliminary ideas on how you might go about solving this issue?
The first issue is to talk, to actually talk to the 360 kids, where the management has steadfastly refused to admit there's an issue. If you go back to some 6 years ago, York Region came out with a report that says they don't have an issue with crimes and whatnot in Crosby. Fine. Today, they say Crosby is one of the worst area in terms of crime. So somebody is lying over there. And it obviously not the residents in Crosby, it is the management. And if I point my finger, I would say the York Region people are lying to the residents. So we need to sit down and deal with them, and to ensure that you know, they come to the table honestly and willing to talk and discuss the issues and fix the problem. There's no more trying to deny. And I've heard stories from the residents where they film those I would say their clients walking into the building, and then when they call the police would come back and tell the residents, 360 kids says that those were not their clients. They don't know who they are. But those same people walk into their own building and are there. So you know, there's a mismatch, and they're not actually telling the stories. They're not actually trying to help fix the issue. So we need to stop that. If there's an issue, sit down on the table and talk, right? If there's a problem, let's deal with it. Those area residents are willing to embrace them. But when there's an issue, don't just, you know, ignore those residents. Talk to them. We can fix a lot of problems by just communicating.
Thank you. So on the issue, we're now, next question is going to be about public parks and green spaces. So
Yeah.
Our public parks and green spaces are a very important part of Richmond Hill. And how will you work to protect and improve the environment of Richmond Hill?
A few things that we can do. If we are building new residential area, we must make the developers set aside parks, set aside playgrounds where it should be part of the mandate, where it should be part of the deal, where if they build, they must also contribute to those and build them. On existing, we have to make sure that we do not allow a conversion of those lands to other uses. We have to make sure that we continually improve areas of parks and recreation. One of the issues I've seen around Richmond Hill is we have a lot of infrastructures that have not been fixed at parks. They let the buildings and whatnot, get into a shape that is not acceptable. They need to fix them. They need to ensure that they are in proper condition for the residents to use. Investing in those parks and recreation is something that will only help the community.
Thank you. And that actually gives us a nice segue into our next topic, which is about the development. So of course, you talked about how developers should be required to do certain things. And we also know that urban development is an important part of city council's responsibility. Right now, the lack of housing is an important problem facing Richmond Hill as our population grows. On the other hand, density of housing and adequate services are also a concern of many residents. What is your philosophy of how city council should approach this problem and balance these two issues?
Now, here's one thing, okay? If you look at what's happening, is we have a lot of opposition on developments on high density around Richmond Hill. How do we balance it? The balancing of all these things is if we have the services that we can handle those development, yes, I say go ahead. If we cannot, then no, we don't. And when you look at affordable housing, many people set a percentage to the development given to affordable housing. I say that may be right or the wrong way. How I would do it is if an organization come and they ask for a 20-story building, right? So we go to them and says, well, give us 15%, and we will give you an extra 3 or 4 story, and boom, here you go. That's your 35%, right? It's a win-win for both sides. Instead of forcing them at a certain level of what they ask for, you make it flexible, you make a deal. There's always ways to handle all these kinds of development. How you deal with it and how you can work with developers, it will be a win-win situation. By putting a hard cap on anything, nothing works, because then you're forcing the issue rather than working with your developers and whatnot to get the issue resolved.
So of course, we see that when people may complain about these high density developments, there are other solutions, for example, having a more amounts of medium density housing instead of concentrating all of the developments in one area. So would you as councillor support concentrated urban development or more spread out medium density urban development?
See, it goes both ways. You cannot always say that it has to be high-rise. To redevelop an area, it's not so easy anymore in Richmond Hill. We are boxed by all 4 towns or city around us. We only have so much land, right? So at some point of time, the land will run out. So where what will we be doing? It's up. So let's plan it properly, do it right, so that we have a plan and a goal to achieve.
And that actually is a perfect segue into our last topical question. We still have one more after that, which is about transportation. So of course we see that with the development of these new buildings, as you would say, that we need, you mentioned earlier that we need adequate services to address this. And one of the more important adequate services to address this is, of course, public transportation to make sure that the traffic does not get worse. So the question here is, what would you do as city councillor to further or keep the public transportation in areas where you're being developed? And what forms of public transportation do you support?
You know, I'd love to see an underground subway all the way up to as far as we can go to Bloomington or whatnot. And that's probably the best way to eliminate a lot of the congestion, because our city is known as the sleepy city, right? And everybody who works goes somewhere else. And I myself drive all the way downtown to downtown Toronto. If we have subway and it's convenient, there's parking, I'll take the subway any day, because you know that's one thing we have to do. One of the biggest issue I would say in the city of Toronto is subway is not sexy. If you look at Scarborough, it took 20 years and they are still fighting over it, and until the Premier Doug Ford stepped in to try to get it built. You know, it's not something that a councillor would like to stand up and says, let's build it. A lot of them knows that in 20 years time, they're not going to be around, so who cares, right? But as far as I'm concerned, it's something we have to be doing. If we can build a subway station every term, you know, we would get it done, but we have to have that willpower and mentality to do it.
Thank you. And I guess a follow-up on that, you support, of course, the creation of an underground subway, which would probably be close to Yonge Street or on Yonge Street. But what about other roads that exist? Because obviously Richmond Hill is a bigger city and your ward is more than just that. And so what would you do for maybe other smaller modes of transportation that might get people to the subway and other forms like that, such as buses and bikes?
But now you already have, you know, if you have a subway system, obviously the buses are going to be feeding into the subway, right? Bikes, build out bikes, park, so that people can drive that. In fact, you know, sometimes what I do is I drive, I cycle and cycle to the subway all the way down, and then I take my bike along and go downtown. But those are few and far in between now. You know, but it's something that could be done. You know, it all depends on what facilities and how we encourage our residents to do. If we don't do things for the residents, we don't get things done. If we are willing to encourage and promote certain activities, obviously that, you know, those things could happen. And maybe we give a discount, right? You know, if you buy a bike, the city will give you $50 off, right? You know, get a coupon, something to encourage people to do something better.
Thank you for that answer. So our last question I will be providing our last question. Our last question is, if you were to be elected, what would be the first issue you would try to address as a whole?
As stated before, the very first issue I will be dealing with is the safety issue in my ward. Crosby area has been one of the worst crime rate and problems with the helipad. I like to sit down with the 360 KIPS management to resolve a lot of issues. I like to deal with the unfriendly wheelchair roads that we have, so that a lot of the handicapped people in those areas and other areas are able to use their wheelchair to go to a lot of places that they now could not go. And I also like to work with our fellow councillors to set an agenda to what we want to do over the next 4 years.
All right, and thank you so much for your time
Okay.
and being here with us at Students for Political Engagement.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me here.